Hello, my lovely 6th grade class. Last night, which chapters of the book we're reading did I send you to read? 6 and 7, thank you. And as you guys are aware, we are reading Counting by Sevens by Holly Goldberg Sloan. And which award did this book receive again? The Concord Book Award, that's correct. In which year? 2015, good job, good job. So today, our reading skill that we are going to use the book to talk about is the difference between first and third person point of view. Not just the differences between them, but how they each have their own benefits and they both have their own drawbacks, and how sometimes you have to use both in order to tell the full picture of something. Multiple perspectives, when you put them together, can tell different parts of the same story and make that story even more worth listening to. I'm going to read from chapters 6 and 7, not the whole thing, bits and pieces, enough to give you our lesson today. All right, shh, everybody quiet down. And as I'm reading, I want you to pay attention to, especially after this first chapter, I'm going to ask if you have any questions, maybe something that a character said or did that doesn't make sense that we might need clarification on. And our purpose for reading today is to notice the differences between first and third person point of view, as well as the ways that multiple perspectives are able to tell different parts of the same story. All right, let's get into it. Chapter 6. I sat in the airless office/trailer and stared at Mr. Del Duke. His head was very round. Most human heads are not very round. Very, very few, in fact, have any real spherical quality. But this chubby, bearded man with bushy eyebrows and sneaky eyes was the exception. He had thick, curly hair and ruddy skin, and it looked to me as if he was at least of partial Mediterranean origin. In my opinion, he wasn't getting enough exercise. I saw that he had a substantial belly under his loose-fitting shirt. He started by saying that he didn't want to discuss my test scores, but that's all he talked about. For a long time, I didn't say a word, and that made him talk more, about a lot of nothing. It was hot in his stuffy little office, and as I stared at him, I could see that he was sweating up a storm. Even his beard was starting to look wet. He was getting more and more agitated. As he spoke, small dots of saliva lodged in the corners of his mouth. They were foamy and white. Here we go. The round-headed counselor/warden finally stopped talking. He was worn out. He folded his short arms defensively over his ball of a belly, and then after a few more minutes of sweaty silence on both of our parts, he had an actual idea. I'm going to say a word, and then you say the first word that comes into your head. I'm not saying the word as a question, it's something else. Let's try to do this very quickly. He sucked in a lot of air and added, think of it as a game. Del Duke didn't know that my experience in this arena was very limited. For the first time since I stepped into the room, I felt mild enthusiasm, because I have found myself to be shockingly competitive. Mr. Del Duke leaned forward in his chair and dramatically said, chocolate. I was interested in the benefits of chocolate, and I said, antioxidant. He tapped his foot like he was accelerating in a car and said, piano. I said, concerto. Excuse me, there we go. Mr. Del Duke tried to write down what he and I said, but he was struggling. Fortunately, he gave up and decided to just play the game. He said space, I said time. He said dark, I said matter. He said big, I said bang. He said car, I said topography. He said mouse, I said wireless. He said white, I said corpuscle. He said single, I said source. He said seed, I said embryo. He said pi, I said 3.141592653589793, blah, blah, blah. We have a time limit here. But I said the number very, very, very fast, and I stopped on the second 7 because, of course, that was my favorite number. Guys, just kidding, no. Mr. Del Duke then loudly shouted, "You animal!" It scared me. I don't like loud things. I was silent for a long time, but then finally managed to find my voice. I said, lemur. In response to him saying animal, as if that was the word. But then his eyes grew sort of dazed for an instant, and he mumbled, female lemurs are in charge of the troop. Okay, lemurs? That's random. Maybe take a note of that. This was an accurate statement. If there is conflict in the group, the female lemurs are the ones who fight it out. Because of this, the female leader gets the best food and the preferred sleeping area. I now looked at him hard. Not everyone knows that a lemur is a primate found only in the island of Madagascar. It was possible he was not the toadstool that he appeared to be. He then ran both of his hands through his curly mop of hair, and that made it double in size. This has happened to my hair before, so I understand. I left the meeting confused. I knew that he knew that I was different. Mr. Del Duke wasn't friend material because he was the wrong age and, female lemurs notwithstanding, we appeared to have absolutely nothing in common. But as I walked away from the district headquarters parking lot, I decided I would come back and see him again. Mr. Del Duke was testing me, but not in the way that he thought. I believed he somehow needed me, and I liked the feeling. Before we read the next chapter, did anyone notice anything odd that happened in that? The whole interaction was kind of weird because of how she was talking about Mr. Del Duke, but did anything stand out to you guys? Yeah, lemurs. What? That's kind of random. Do you think maybe this next chapter will answer that question about why he just mentioned lemurs out of nowhere? Let's see. Chapter 7. This one's going to be shorter. Del didn't see many girls. Boys got into a lot more trouble in school. Remember, guys, Mr. Del Duke is like the guidance counselor. Not very good at his job. Boys got into a lot more trouble in school. He had assumed that Willow was some kind of nickname. He figured it was really Will-Low, which might have been gang slang. Instead, seated across from him had been a 12-year-old girl. There was something not right about her. He could see that from the beginning. Her eyes darted around his small room and then came to rest on his stomach, which was rude. He needed to put her in a category of strange as soon as possible so that he could disconnect from whatever was happening in the room. Del had glanced over at his computer to reread the email he'd been sent from Principal Rudin. The message said that the girl was some kind of cheater. He didn't get many of those. So, she was sneaky. Well, so was he. He'd get to the bottom of that. She wasn't a weirdo or a lone wolf or an oddball or a misfit, but she was super strange. That much he could figure out. He talked and talked and talked, and she just sat there, mute, staring at him. But he could tell that she was listening. He asked questions, but she didn't answer them. She was small, but also powerful. She had some kind of energy or aura that was just different. None of his tricks, if he could even call them that, worked. And then he remembered word association. It was a technique that he knew the other counselors used because he'd heard them when their windows were open and the air conditioner wasn't rattling. Del fell asleep almost every night with the television on. He had hours of recorded broadcasts because the sound of other people's voices, especially ones that weren't yelling at him, was a comfort. But nothing made him fall asleep faster than something educational. And that is why, as the hour got late and Del was looking to pack it in, he often went to the most boring thing that he'd ever recorded, a wildlife documentary on the animals of Madagascar. Hang in there, hang in there. There was nothing in this program of interest, and Del had fallen asleep to it many times since he came to Bakersfield. He could not recall a single thing from the program other than what he had uttered to Willow at the end of their first session. Female leaders are in charge of the troop. There's the connection. As she gathered up her things and silently headed out the door, Del realized that his somewhat hairy hands were both trembling. He had never met a kid like this. That is all. So, I kind of made it obvious, but what is something about this interaction that we only have an answer to because we got Del's perspective as well as Willow's? Correct. why on earth did he mention lemurs? Now we know, because like through some sort of indirect osmosis of falling asleep to this boring program every night, he remembered that lemurs are in charge of the troop. What's interesting though is, what is the story trying to tell us by him remembering this at this moment? He seems kind of intimidated by Willow. He doesn't get a lot of girls in his office, as he said. Why do you think the author chose to make him remember this random fact as opposed to something else? Anybody? Yeah. Yeah, because in this moment, Willow kind of seems in charge. Like I said, he's intimidated by her, and he's normally kind of sort of the one in control of these meetings, because even though he's kind of incompetent at his job, he is the adult and he has the power to get the kids in trouble. However, Willow is giving him nothing, and he doesn't know what to do. He's never seen a kid like her before. When we have one perspective telling one thing, and then another perspective telling another thing about the same thing, we get a more complete story, which is something that this book does very well. It has like multiple perspectives from multiple different characters, not just Willow and not just you. You guys know that already. I want to do an activity, and you guys can work on it in class and as homework if you don't finish it in class. I think you can finish it in class though. What I want you to do is either use your school computers or take your own picture of something that from one perspective looks like one thing, and then from another perspective it's actually revealed that that thing is something else completely. And if you'll let me log into my computer real quick, I'll show you the example that I made. Here we go. So on the bookshelves back there, you see we have a stack of, we have a dictionary. And what I did was I took a picture of one of the dictionaries, see, and there's my hand there. But actually, when I flipped the phone to turn it at a different perspective, it was actually a stack of dictionaries that I had my hand on, not just the singular one, but because it's a different perspective, you wouldn't have known that unless I took the second picture. And it doesn't have to be as boring as dictionaries. That's just something I had in the room. You could do something fun, something funny. If you're going to look up pictures, I'd rather you use the school Wi-Fi so that it'll block anything inappropriate. Nothing inappropriate, please. And you guys can go ahead and get to work on that. And after you take the pictures, I want a 2 to 3 sentence description of what it is. That's all I need from you guys. Okay, go ahead and get to work.